I was just bedridden, just sitting on a chair like a zombie. Like I couldn't get up and do basic things. So I went to check my blood, like super stressed and jittery for a few days. And then I started doing therapy, and she suggested a book about anxiety. And the book could have been called Kitze is a dumbass who lives life the opposite way as everything in this book says.
Kitze, hey, welcome to the Bug Mind. I'm so happy to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine and a bit nervous because of the name of the show. Like, you're going to debug my mind, so... Yeah.
Don't worry, we're just going to use a bunch of console logs all around. I'm not good at any of the actual debugging tools. So for people that don't know you, which are probably going to be just like my mom, probably she's the only one. What do you do in tech?
What do I do in tech? It's a hard question to answer. I create apps, web apps, native apps, give conference talks, give workshops. But mostly...
What's an example of one of these apps? Like, there's one we're going to talk about in a bit, but I know you've done many.
Yeah. Well, my main project is Sizzy. I'm making a browser for developers, which goes like perfectly with the theme of the podcast, which is mental health. If you ever want to ruin your mental health, go work with Electron and decide that you're going to make a browser for 5 years, for 5 freaking years. So you constantly see these Twitter articles about this dumb app, which is an AI audio recorder, makes $50,000 per month just in 3 months. And here you are debugging some Electron WebView craziness for 5 years, just struggling to sell developers that they need to switch away from Chrome and from the other things. So,
well, at the same time, you were also able to create a product that in 5 years still hasn't been replaced by AI. You know, like all of these startups are probably gonna like collapse in the next 6 months. So, but yeah, so I know that you're very passionate about productivity, and you've also made one of these other apps, which, if I remember correctly, is called Benji, that you use as an habit tracker. Like, how does productivity play a role in your life? Let's start from there.
So I recently went to my grandma's place and I found a to-do list from when I was, I don't know, 12 years old or something like that.
Nice.
So like a to-do list, which what does a 12-year-old have to do in the day? You know, like literally I had things like ride my bike and go pick out the basketball and shit like that. So I've always, I guess my mind functions that way ever since I was little, that I need to make a plan and I need to make a list. Otherwise, I cannot complete things. But even with lists, even with habits, even with building my own app about this, I'm still missing on stuff and I'm still late on stuff. So I basically created Benji as, it started as a habit tracker. I'm taking it into the direction of making like a life OS, like literally an operating system for your life. So instead of you using one app for habits, one app for to-dos, one app for your planner, one app for your Pomodoros and whatever, like I'm trying to make like a system of all of these things working together, helping people, especially people who have like ADHD or like they're finding it hard to organize their lives and plan their days and plan their weeks, months, and so on and so forth. Like I think we've been talking with you and you have a custom Notion setup, if I remember correctly, right? So a lot of people, whenever they are like in a mode of, okay, I'm going to fix my life, you know, and they're just faced with a blank Notion document and they're like, okay, what the hell do I do? So they either build something on their own or they buy a template or they combine multiple templates. I want to make like a turnkey solution to when you're, you know, I compare this to like quitting cigarettes or quitting alcohol, for example. Like if you get sick of it, you can, you know, like in the movies, they go and pour it down the drain. There's no pouring down the drain for productivity. When you're like, okay, I'm tired. From tomorrow, I'm going to start fasting and working out and this and that. And then you get faced with the apps and you're like, oh, okay, this fasting app is nice, but it's iOS only. Okay, this workout app it's nice, but it's a subscription. And then by the time you join them together, you get burned out from the thought of fixing your life. And you're like, just fuck it, you know, I'm not going to bother with this. So I'm trying to make the solution for that problem.
Nice. And I think it's great also because, you know, sometimes starting a new habit by itself is a very like hard thing. You know, like I think that one of the best recommendations I've heard about adding a new habit to your life is basically attaching it to an existing habit.
Yes.
Like, for example, if you want to start walking 50 minutes a day, you should do it after breakfast. So whenever you do breakfast, you associate this new habit to it and it kind of like sticks around.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's why, you know, gym memberships always fail by February, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm gonna do it, I have it now, and then the overwhelming amount of effort kind of like kills you off right away. Yeah, so you mentioned I have a Notion that I use for my personal tracking. It's like it's weekly based, and then I move things around for each day. But like, for example, how does like your daily routine works? Like, do you use Benji for everything?
I do use Benji for everything, but like first of all, I don't want to make the podcast episode a shill. And I don't anytime no I'm that. Just like I want to prefix before saying stuff about Benji so people know. Even in my own podcast, I constantly talk about the downsides and the flaws in Benji. So personally, in the last like week or 2 or 3 or even a month, I just mostly stopped using the habit tracking feature. Like I use all the other things. I'm completely reliant on the Pomodoros and tasks and whatever. And maybe I added more than 50 habits at this point. And I'm overwhelmed that it feels like I'm filling in a questionnaire, like a USA visa or something. It's like too much. So anytime I'm faced with my habits list, I'm like, maybe in the morning I'll check a few and then I just leave them by the end of the day. I still will do those things. Like let's say I have no alcohol or no sweets. I will still not have them, but I'll forget to check them because I guess every habit tracker has the same problem. People just don't open the habit tracker. And I thought if I make Benji also have other things, like people, while they check their to-dos, they're also going to check their habits, but it's completely not true. People do that, but I've stopped personally doing that. So
yeah, I do use a separate app for habits, which is called Strix. Yeah. And I think the way the developer work around the problem that you just described is that basically it basically asks you to use it as a widget. So on iOS, I have the widget part, and it only shows 4 of them. So even if like I have 2 pages of habits in the app, it will only show like the 4 most likely ones that I should be completing at that point in time. Yeah. And I mean, but I totally get like the thing of like, I still do the thing, I don't check it out. I think because at least for me, after a while, after I was doing like habit tracking and daily routines and everything, I find that lately I'm just like, it's more important to have completed the task than tracking the task.
Yes, that's
true. But I know that for some people it's not like that. Yeah. Yep. But so that way I counterbalanced a bit. We're not only talking about Benji, we're also talking about Notion, we're talking about Strix.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you kind of already mentioned is you're making this tool as a way of like also helping people with ADHD. And this is a podcast about mental health. Yeah. When did you first become aware of your mental health?
First, as most people before COVID, let's say, anytime I would hear about someone with mental health issues, like it seemed like a mystery, like what the hell they're talking about. That stupid Jim Carrey quote, like that everyone is overusing. If you're depressed, but if you only run and do this, blah, 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 you don't give yourself a fighting chance, something like that. So I was more on that side of people, like more judgy people who, when they look at someone who has depression, anxiety, ADHD, whatever, you're just like, oh, just go fix yourself, go run or something, And you think that it will never happen to you. So during COVID, I was overworking myself quite a lot because no hanging out with people and other stuff. So I've been streaming for most of the day, just coding on a product, not realizing how it can affect me. And I combined it with bad eating habit I always had. I guess that's also part of the conversation about mental health, that I always had issues with overeating and my weight going up and going down, or being like super skinny or being like super fat and going like I've never had the perfect physique that I want. I've had long periods where I was like eating fine, but also long periods where I was eating like crap. I would have a burst of few days, which when you combine them with like you work all day and then you eat like 1 or 2 large pizzas, and then you combine it with a few ice creams and stuff, like the chemical explosion that happens in your body is like crazy. So I think one day I've been working all day and then I ate very bad food and then I couldn't sleep naturally. So once that chain of event happens, I woke up like jittery, haven't slept, and just feeling all the sugar and salt and everything in my body. And I don't know what I was doing around the home, like washing dishes or something. And I don't even know how maybe I was researching about ADHD because I didn't know about any of these terms, So I started researching like ADHD, anxiety, this, that, why am I tingly, what is going on? And while I was washing the dishes, I just thought of, oh my God, what if I need to take meds about ADHD? And that's something that freaks me out. And I think that thought just pushed me over the edge towards my first panic attack. I had only a few, I think 2 or 3, and they were mostly around COVID, and I never had them since, thanks God.
Okay.
But when that pushed me over the edge, and I started like panicking. And like, I've talked to other people who had a panic attack, and everyone has a different experience. And it seems to me I got hit, my first one was like the ones where you like derealize a little bit from your body. I don't know if you ever had that. I don't wish it on my worst enemy. You feel like your soul has moved like a few inches from your body and you need to align it back. It was like, for someone who hasn't felt, like, I didn't know what anxiety is. Like when I felt that, it felt like very scary, and I had to calm myself and blah, blah, blah. And then I started doing therapy for the first time. I was never opposed to therapy. Let's say my family was. They were always like, people don't need that. You can always fix yourself, and you don't need another person to fix your problems, yada, yada, yada. So like, that's how they taught me, and that's how I was thinking about it. But after a while, I was like anxiety got me so down that for a few days I couldn't get myself out of bed. And I couldn't believe that your mind could do that, Like there's nothing physically wrong with your arms and legs. I was just bedridden, just sitting on a chair like a zombie. Like I couldn't get up and do basic things. So I went to check my blood, like super stressed and jittery for a few days. And then I started doing therapy, and she suggested a book about anxiety. And the book could have been called Kitze is a Dumbass Who Lives Life the Opposite Way as Everything in this book says. So the book chapters were like, take a weekend of rest every month, take a week of rest every quarter, take a month of rest every year. Me, 0 rest throughout the year, overwork yourself. Then, no caffeine. I would do like a couple of cups of caffeine per day of coffee. Then it was like, no sweet, salt, sugar, like keep it down, sleep well. Basically, I was checking the boxes for all the opposite things. And then I was yelling at a cloud, like, why does this happen to me? And then you have, all the reasons why. So that was like my first big experience with like, like what is going on with me, and starting therapy and seeing a therapist and slowly trying to fix myself. So.
And was that one of the reasons why you started having like this habit tracker? Like you wanted to, in a way, keep yourself in the healthy part of the book? Like you wanted to make sure that you were, not causing yourself to end up in another panic attack?
No, because I started the to-do part of this app and the habit tracker of this app, like 2 separate things in like 2016, 17, 18. So I've been already messing with the idea, because I've never been satisfied with the mainstream apps, let's call them. I would use Todoist and Notion and Coda and Streaks and things, but I always needed something more custom and more powerful and more tailored to me. So I always wanted that. At some point, I just realized, okay, if I don't build this for myself, no one else is going to build, like a life OS. Everyone's going to just keep it surface level. So...
Interesting. And
yeah,
well, you already mentioned you have a podcast. You already mentioned, being very outspoken. And one of the things that I think you mentioned literally in a couple episodes ago when we're recording this video is that you've been diagnosticated with ADHD. How's that experience been?
So it's very hard to find a specialist here in this city, like someone who specializes in ADHD. Like it's hard to find a good therapist, and then on top of it, here you have a good therapist who speaks English and is specializes in ADHD. So that's like the hardest problem in Poland. So I would have booked it immediately if I could find someone good, and I was just like, oh, I'm not going to deal with this. And at some point I told my wife, you have more free time, you're more on your phone. If you just find me someone, I'm going to go and get diagnosed, because I want to know the truth, Like all the signs point to it. I just wanted to know, like scientifically, by the book, do I have it or not? So I went and answered this questionnaire for like 2.5 hours. And then the lady, the therapist said, I can give you the diagnosis, but that's going to cost you more. So it's hilarious, because you already pay for the 2 hours, you pay for the full session. And then after you give all of your answers, she's like, well, this was great, and it ended here. So if you want to know the answer, you need to pay more. So I was like, fine, sure. She needs to analyze the results, probably with ChatGPT or whatever. And I paid her, and I finished the questionnaire yesterday. And now I'm waiting for, her scientific analysis of the thing. Okay. Even though, like, just by answering the questions, I could see like a glowing yes above her head. Like, yes, you do have ADHD. I just want to know the severity of it. And because there are people who are like non-functional. I'm like, I consider myself like very functional and very successful, and I've done a lot of things, and I can whip myself in shape to do certain things. Like I cannot say like I have like severe ADHD and I'm blocked from doing anything. I just want to know the status of it and what to do about it, basically.
What were some of, so let's say that maybe someone is like you, they want to kind of like potentially getting diagnosed. What are some of the signals? You mentioned, I had all the signals. What are some of the signals that pointed you towards thinking that you have ADHD?
So first, as an advice to people who want to know whether they have it or not, like the easiest thing you can do nowadays is just go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, I know you're not a prophet. You got to prefix it to tell it, hey, I know that this is not professional opinion and it's fine, but can you give me like 10 questions or 30 or 50, depending on how much time you have, to diagnose me whether I have ADD or ADHD. Like that's the easiest thing and anyone can do it. And after I did my podcast episode, a bunch of people DM'd me with, hey, I did the ChatGPT thing and it turns out I also have the same thing. Now what do we do? So the symptoms are, like they're different for ADD because the H part just adds the hyperactivity. So you might or might not have the hyperactivity part. So basically there are a bunch of questions about your childhood. Have you been forgetful and forgetting objects and dropping things and not being able to focus or focusing too much on a thing? Like, I don't want to, just spew off a few questions here that's going to throw people in a different direction. But if you just look at the word attention deficit, hyperactivity, just see if you have any of those things just by looking at those words. And then just by doing the ChatGPT questionnaire, it's more or less going to be a correct, or any quiz online. Like I knew that I had it when I was Googling for ADHD quizzes, and I would complete like 15% of it, and then I would get distracted and do something else. And I'm like,
okay,
like there's the answer.
I think that's a clear sign. Yeah, absolutely. And just again to reiterate, please talk to an actual professional.
Yes.
We're gonna leave a couple links in the comments to like Psychology Today, where there are some more like actual medical professional advice. If you're someone that looks at TikTok, I was literally looking the other day, there was one of these Wired episodes, they do like blank support where they like grab a bunch of questions from Twitter and have an expert reply. And they had someone for mental health month, like they had the therapist, and it was like mental health support. And one of the things he mentioned was that there was a study where they like analyzed 500 TikToks, and basically 82% were basically saying some wrong things, and 14% were telling people actually like dangerous things or like things that would damage them. So make sure, do like Kitze, and talk to actual professionals. Okay, so you talk about ADHD. You also mentioned like these concern about taking medications. What's that about?
I don't know. It was just in the beginning, it was just an irrational fear of like, just a mixed feelings of people are going to judge me and they're going to think this and they're going to think that. And I failed my parents and I failed society and I failed life if I don't sit down and fix it myself. That's how I felt in the beginning. Now I have, let's say, similar stance towards it because I know the level of it is not severe, because I have periods of time where I can actually focus. And when I say I'm going to do something on that day, I only do that and I don't do anything else. So if I have the will in me sometimes to do that, because it's, how I look at it is, first of all, I think before I go, like I see that as the ultimate solution. Let's say everyone says it's like the most effective thing, but it's still a brain altering thing, which like, according to the therapist, she said, it has other side effects. It might introduce insomnia and weight loss, which, it might be a good side effect in my case. And heart palpitations and heart problems and a bunch of other things. So I would look at that if you've tried all the other things and then there's nothing else to try and you're like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And if you ask me, okay, Kitze, have you been doing the usual things that are recommended for like better mental health? Or like if you just search on YouTube for like ADHD tips, like I watched a couple of videos recently and the overlap that they had was working out, good sleep, good food. So if you ask me about those three, are you doing them recently in the last week, month, year, let's say, my answer would be no. So I'm just looking for a shortcut and I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to fix it the hard way. I want to fix it the other way, So when I would do all of those things consistently, let's say I work out 3 to 4 times per week and I sleep on time and I eat clean and whatever, and I still show all the symptoms and I'm not functional, then I would be like, all right, I cannot work this out on my own. I'm going to find a solution. Because the first therapist that I had after a few sessions about anxiety, I think, that's why we had the talk before, and I told you it's hard to find a therapist because a lot of them are similar to ChatGPT with some degree from, especially if you go on BetterHelp, like you will find someone with a degree from some online American university that you haven't even heard of, but they still get, the title of being a therapist. And after a few sessions, they'll be like, why don't you try meds? And I'm like, I haven't meditated once in my life, about the anxiety, or I still haven't taken a break from work, and I haven't done the checklist of things. And I told her, like, I would do that once I do the checklist. And it turns out, once I got my shit together, like the anxiety just, like thankfully I haven't had it like in a really long time to feel this jitteriness and to feel, I feel a bit of it when I'm talking about it because I think the brain is just, recreating all those moments during COVID and this and that. But other than that, in like regular life, I don't have it anymore because a lot of the things I fixed them regarding my overworking and this and that, So that's how I see it, similar to the ADHD. Once I try everything on a checklist, then I'll be like, okay, I'm going to take something that also has side effects and alters my brain in a way.
Gotcha. I think it's sensible as kind of like recognizing also that there are other things in your life that impact your mental health and saying, okay, out of those things, I have control over these ones. Let's try to tackle them. Like, would you, like, if someone asked you, like, how did you fix your sleep, for example? I think that as coders, and I want to also touch a bit in a different angle, but first about this, like, we're coders, we live online, we, look a lot at social media, like, especially in the JavaScript sphere, like, there's a lot of, use of Twitter as a way of, like, become known in the community. And I think that there's a lot of hustle culture. And one of those things is like, oh, don't sleep, overwork. No, those are some of the things. But if you were to suggest to someone like how they could actually get better sleep, for example, what would be like one of the recommendations you would give them?
I think one of the hardest things regarding getting better sleep is to turn off all your devices on time. Like it's almost like playing a game of whack-a-mole. Like it's impossible. I would be like, okay, I have a blocker on my phone. It's blocked at 9 p.m. My wife has the password. I cannot use my phone. And at 9 p.m., like my brain just goes, yeah, but let's find another device, Let's go to the TV. And then I think you need to put more friction. The more you put it, like let's say I logged out of YouTube from the main TV. And like that's the most addicting thing to me. Like if I just watch YouTube, if I go to Netflix, I'll be like, maybe I don't feel like watching something and I'll go to sleep. So we need to introduce more and more friction and basically reduce the friction for going to bed by eliminating all the devices, setting up blockers. And I have my computers, like both my laptop and my work computer, to lock at an exact time at night. So lock means I try to type in my password, I press enter, and then it auto locks until the morning. Like I cannot trust myself that I'm not going to stay on YouTube late. It's, I'll be brushing my teeth, just looking at something. Suddenly, oh shit, it's midnight, So blockers, yeah, like you can rely on willpower, which is a lot of times like very hard, or you can just like sign a pact with yourself and be like, okay, I'm going to put downtime on my phone, give the password to my wife, to a friend, to whoever, and then you're screwed basically. Like you cannot enter your phone because no one's going to give you the password. So that's what works. Everything else is easy, putting dark shades and sipping on cocoa and, all those tips on Huberman, like those are easy peasy. Tell me, how do you block your devices so you go to sleep on time? No one stays up late to read or whatever. Rarely,
Nice. Yeah, I think I've stopped staying up late for reading like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
As soon as I was out of my teenage years, I was like, I don't need books anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true, honestly. And maybe probably it's also like an interesting way you're addressing your own ADHD, like this idea of like, I know I cannot really trust myself. So I need to get like this kind of like system in place around me that will force me to go down the right path.
Yeah.
I think it's sensible. It makes a lot of sense. And, the other angle I wanted to talk to you about, our tech sphere is also like this idea that, okay, let me ask it as a question. Like, how have you found that being outspoken about mental health, talking about, not overworking, talking about getting good sleep, like, how's your experience about talking about these things in public?
It's fine. A lot of people want to follow what you do online. A lot of times, I'll be like, hey, from now on, I'll wake up at 5:30 a.m. And at least a few people are like, hey, Kitze, I'm joining you. I'm also going to do this. So I've never had or given a crap about people thinking the opposite, If I say, I don't know what you mean by this question. If you can give me a more specific example.
Totally. So, for example, my experience with this project is that I still find that a lot of people in tech don't want to talk about these topics. They're still... So, for example, at Microsoft, we did have a lot of like outspokenness about mental health, but I could see that it wasn't the same everywhere else. So, in a way, talking about mental health is something that sometimes can isolate you from a bunch of your peers because they would rather, not deal with
100%.
what they're going through.
That's true. That's true. People don't want to listen about it, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's in real life. I think it makes everyone uncomfortable. People just want to chit chat and shoot the shit. They don't want to, like you start being serious and everyone's looking at you like, why is are you trying to bring the mood down? And everyone is dealing with something. I realize that, we don't label them that way, but I come from Macedonia, which is the land of every guy above 30 spends most of the rest of their lives in they're not pubs, let's call them. Like, you don't have the concept, so I can describe to you the actual word, but let's say they just spend most of their life in a pub drinking. And that's like they're curing something. And then the wives mostly are at home dealing with 2 kids, 3 kids, dealing with chaos. So both of those sides are dealing with heavy mental problems, but they will both sit down and judge if someone says that they have anxiety. They'll be like, what is that? And they both have it. Whether it's anxiety, depression, or some form of something, everyone has it. So I think it's good to talk about it because do you listen to Logic, the rapper?
I know that he has done a few songs and he's been very outspoken about his struggles.
Yes, yeah. But in the rap game, if you talk about mental health, everyone's talking about the clubs and the chains and the guns, and then there's this guy talking about his anxiety and panic attack, and some people ridicule him about that. To me, it was very helpful to find someone to relate and someone who can be like, okay, I have nothing to hide. These are all of my issues. And I think life is like, I have 2 opinions about this. Like, it's way easier when you just put out your cards on the table and you're like, hey, this is who I am and these are all my flaws. So shoot me, judge me, whatever you're going to do, this is me, I think it's way easier than to constantly try to live with the pressure of like a mask of, that mask meme with the crying behind the mask, but the mask is just smiling. And I think that's way harder to keep it up all the time. I think that's going to break you down and drive you more crazy if you constantly try to portray a face, an image, or whatever. That's why I made Kitzecast like something where I can vent and tell people exactly what it is instead of just making videos. I made millions of dollars this month and this is what I bought and I wanted them to see what it's like when I struggle, so they're equally as happy when I win or when I do something. Everyone is like, yeah, he did the thing even though he struggled. It's more relatable. When you watch someone's channel, it's only winning. You are like, nah, I'm missing something here, So it is nice talking about it. But I'm also going to give you something else that actually helped me. Let's say, I don't want to say cure my anxiety because I don't think that it's something that just goes away forever. So it might come back and stuff. But I would say in a large sense, just cured it and got rid of all of those things. And that's not talking about it. So a lot of people who struggle with these things, they get in a perpetual cycle of constantly talking about these things and constantly complaining to other people about these things. And I think that just makes it even worse. And you're going down like a vortex of that you're not going to go out, because anytime someone judges you for talking about that, you're like, oh, so are you judging me about my mental health problems? And no one is judging you about your mental health problems. They're judging you about keep talking and amplifying your mental health problems. Because I've seen the effect, and it's like it can be like a switch in the brain. I don't know how to explain it, that you decide, okay, I'm not going to make this part of my personality anymore. And I'm not going to, brag. Because it sounds like not bragging, but it's also bragging. Like I've read several discussions and opinions about this online. It feels like, everyone is talking about average things around you. And you feel like, oh, you guys think you have problems? Now let me tell you what I'm dealing with. And even though it's something that you're struggling with, it also gives you the sense of like, you're unique, you're sharing something, and slowly you make it part of your personality. And then you lose yourself in it and you get offended when someone calls you out that you're talking about it too much. And I've heard this example somewhere. There was this friend who went to a friend's place and just started talking about panic attacks, basically. Oh man, do you know how many panic attacks I had this week and blah, blah, blah. And this friend got finally fucking sick of it, And he was like, hey man, how many floors did you climb yesterday? Because and he's like, well, I don't know exactly. It doesn't matter. And he was like, well, when you act towards your panic attacks like a similar way, like the floors that you climb, when you just say it doesn't matter and you stop babbling about it everywhere, it's going to get better. And I think when I saw that clip, I don't know where I saw it, like that was the switch for me. It's like, holy shit, you can just make it be relevant. It's like the hardest problem in the world is also like the easiest problem in the world. It sounds like too easy of a solution to get rid of these things. If you're like, oh, I don't know how many breadcrumbs I ate yesterday. Also, I don't know how many times I struggled this month because it doesn't matter. It was like a switch in me that helped me a lot. It's not like I erased it completely, but it definitely helped me a lot.
So in a way, let me try to say it back to see if I followed. So basically you're saying, yes, you should be aware of your mental health. You should be aware of like how you should deal with it. But at the same time, it shouldn't be the only trait of your personality. And you shouldn't, if you keep track of how many days you've been depressed, your mind is just hyperfixating on that.
Yes.
And so you're not getting out of the habit of just thinking of like, I'm going to have another depressed day.
Yeah.
More or less, right? Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure like if that can apply to all mental health issues.
100%
some
not.
are,
No.
are a bit more heavy on like your actual health. So, but I totally understand what you're saying. And it's also very interesting that, you're from Macedonia. I'm from Italy. I was talking with Sarah from Spain in another episode. I was talking with Matt from the US in another episode. And there is always this element of like, sharing, but also how our environments around us respond to that. And, this also the +1 game, like sometimes people share because they are just doing it for the first time. They want just to be heard. And if someone replies, oh, but I've suffered more, it's really not helpful. So sharing within a group can always be a bit concerning, and you should probably
start with
that in a more of a one-to-one scenario. Yeah.
100%. And so just not to make it sound wrong, like what I said, definitely share with your spouse, share with someone. I think it's the worst if you just keep it in you and you're going through something and you don't tell anyone. Yeah. Share it with a therapist. The thing that I mentioned earlier, yes, ChatGPT and AIs and LLMs can be wrong about many things. But for a lot of people, like therapy and going to therapy is such a scary topic. They think probably someone is listening to this right now and judging me or you or someone for going to therapy. Like I can guarantee you 100%. I don't know a percentage, but there's a certain percentage who's like, yeah, I don't. Well, maybe with not the niche of this podcast, maybe not, but most people would. But if you just it's literally chatting. Yes, ChatGPT or anyone is not gonna, any LLM is not gonna give you like professional advice, but maybe it will just crack the door open for you a little bit for you to see that you can just go and talk to a person. It's like just talking to your grandma or your mom, except they're gonna give you professional advice and not, just mom or
make you feel
or grandma advice. Yeah. So definitely share, but share with the right person. Don't have your group of friends and you're the one who always shows up and always brings everyone down with the same old topic. Because the best answer when someone is struggling with something, it sounds a little bit dick, it sounds a little bit, I don't know. But if someone keeps complaining about something, let's say, I cannot raise my MRR or I cannot raise my, I don't know, YouTube views or whatever it is, you can be sorry for them. You can be like, oh man, that's so bad. What are you doing about it? And in 99% of complaints, whether it's about anything, people won't have an answer to that because they just want to do the complain part and get a little bit of empathy and get a little bit like, oh, you're struggling from that. That's so bad. But ask them, what do you do about it? And most of them will be like, well, So
Yeah, it kind of also goes back to what you were saying earlier about reading that book, right? Like, oh, I'm yelling at the clouds, I'm feeling bad, and that. Okay, are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Are you not overworked? I think that also makes sense, and I think in a way, like, I think it's also like a nice bow where to close this episode of like. Talk with people, but not too much, not in groups. But no, I also agree with the idea that potentially, interacting with an AI or something via chat as a first way of getting a taste of what it feels like to be able to express yourself in a safe environment.
Yes.
That's probably something very solid, and it's also very accessible.
Yes.
I would personally suggest to people maybe avoid something like BetterHelp, because over like a couple times throughout the past few years has come out that platform is very bad in a number of ways.
They were leaking data.
Yeah, exactly.
So you would go and dump your brain there about everything private in your life, and they would just sell it to someone to sell you ads.
Yeah,
so it's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It's maybe not BetterHelp, but like consider finding a therapist. I also did write a blog post about that, which was originated by our conversations, actually. So I mean, Kitze, thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
I absolutely enjoyed our chat, and
Same.
I wish you well with your journey in therapy, and I'm sure that we can all keep up with the Kidscast to learn more.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. Bye.